Now I continue in 1 Timothy chapter number 3. This is a true saying, if a man desire the office of a bishop, he desireth a good work. A bishop then must be blameless. Number 2, the husband of one wife. Number 3, vigilant. Number 4, sober. Number 5, of good behavior. Number 6, given to hospitality. Today, number 7, apt to teach. Now, when I left the radio yesterday, we were winding down the area of given to hospitality, and I pointed out that the bishop, if he is going to survive and have a long-term pastorate, do a long-term work for Christ's honor and glory, he will have to be a man that is given to the reception not only of strangers and being hospitable, carrying the idea of showing hospitality to people passing through, showing hospitality to people that are strangers. Anybody can do that for a while because a stranger is not going to be there very long. Now, I know some people, they'd be rude to people passing by. But if a pastor, a bishop, is going to have a long-term labor and long-term service, he will have to learn to give of himself to his congregation, especially where he is laboring with people over and over and over, year after year. And in many instances, some pastors that have long pastorates have long memberships, and they have some members of their congregation that they've been preaching to 30 years, 35 years, 40 years. They've been passing in the hallway, shaking hands, fellowshipping, going to prayer room together, serving on the deacon board, where you have a long-term relationship. And in order to have that kind of a ministry, a man would have to be given. It would have to be a part of his nature. You can fake anything for a while, but you can't fake this. You can't fake this for decades. A man that would be given to hospitality. If a pastor is going to serve, and if he's worth his weight in salt, he will give of himself to his people. He will give of his time. He will give of his energy. He will give himself. He will give himself to the people that he is laboring before and pastoring. We have this celebrity phenomena of some men that pastor churches, so-called, quote-unquote, and they get up and deliver a sermon to those people, but you can never get to them. You can't talk to them. They won't come see you in the hospital. They won't go visit in the nursing home. They're rock stars. They're celebrities. You can never get close to them, and they certainly are not going to get close to you. Now, I recognize that, and I dealt with this on yesterday, I recognize that all of us need downtime. We need time to be away. We need time to be alone. We need time to ourselves. Every pastor needs some time to study, to prepare, to read, to be ready to preach to the congregation. And you can't do that. Prepare to stand before your people in a busy environment or busy situation. Not at all. And you ought to have time to study. I do my study in my work, a lot of my work at home, where it's quiet, and I can be to myself, and I can get my messages ready to bring. But when I go to the church, in my meetings, I sit on the front row, and the people have access to me. And if I get there 30 minutes before the service begins, I question whether or not I'm truly on time. My grandfather used to like to be at the church sometimes an hour before the service begins. And he was always available to the people. And he shook tens of thousands of hands, but he wanted the people to have access to him. Now, at the end of the service, especially if he's driving to and from, he was just a little bit, a few minutes from being in his automobile driving home. But he tried to get there early so that the people could have access to him and could talk to him, he could talk to them, and fellowship, given to hospitality, given to hospitality. Then the last phrase I find in verse number 2, apt to teach. The minister, the bishop, is to be apt to teach. Now, there's more than one office that I find in the New Testament. There's the bishop, the elder, the pastor, and then there's the evangelist and the teacher and the apostle. And I think that the apostles in our day would be very close to being understood as the missionaries, those that go out with a message, those sent away with a message to preach the gospel in the regions beyond. But there are some offices that some men are just better fitted for than others. And a man that is going to be a bishop, one of the criteria, and it says a bishop then must be. And if he must be the husband of one wife, then he also must be apt to teach. And I've run into a few pastors over the years, and I've been preaching 40 years now. I've been preaching a long time. And so I'm not a novice. And I've run into some pastors that were not apt to teach. They just were not apt to teach. And I question, perhaps they would be better fitted for an evangelistic work where they go about from pulpit to pulpit, church area to area, and place to place, and preach to those congregations. And I've run into a few evangelists along the way that have never pastored churches, and yet it seemed to me that their ministry was given to teaching and much more pastoral than some of the men I've run into pastoring churches. Of course, we have the phenomena today of men that pastor churches and hold 52 revival meetings a year, and I kind of scratch my head about that. I know Paul told Timothy to do the work of an evangelist, but Paul didn't tell Timothy to be an evangelist. He said do the work of an evangelist. He didn't say be an evangelist. And I know my grandfather held a lot of meetings during his ministry at the tabernacle. But my grandfather was never gone on Sunday. And he was never gone on Sunday morning. If he was in the hospital, he'd be gone on Sunday morning. You could count on one hand the times in 43 years that my grandfather was not at the tabernacle on Sunday morning. And maybe a handful more times, but not many more times, that he was not there on Sunday night. The bishop is to be apt to teach. Now, this word apt, like so many words, has lost meaning over the years, and we say that someone is apt to a certain gift or apt to a certain office. And how do we define that? How am I to define that? The word apt is defined as being fit or suitable for something. He is apt, he is suitable for a particular office. He is suitable to do a certain thing. There are some men that I've run across in the course of my life that never had the patience to teach. They were not apt to teach. They were not suitable to do that work. The word apt carries with it another definition, and that is having a tendency to do a certain thing. We say that man's apt to do this, or that man is apt to do that. The bishop is to be apt to teach. One of my heroes is the late Dr. Oliver B. Green. Of course, my grandfather, Dr. Harold Seitler, obviously is one of my heroes, but he was my grandfather. But Dr. Oliver Green was one of my heroes. And there is no doubt that Dr. Green was a powerful and a fervent preacher of the Word. There is no doubt about that. But even in the great evangelistic campaigns, in the great tent meetings that Dr. Green held all over the South and all over the country during the course of his ministry, even while he was thundering from the pulpit, his preaching was always coupled with teaching. And that falls directly into the line of what Paul states here, apt to teach, having a tendency. He was always liable to start teaching while he was preaching. is having a tendency. He is a man that expounds on and explains. There are some men that don't have that capacity. They would be well suited for an evangelistic effort. They'd be well suited for missions work. But the bishop must be apt to teach. There must be a tendency, or one would say an inclination to. He's inclined to do certain things. We use that terminology. We say, well, he had a predisposition to this, or he had a predisposition to that. And whenever we say somebody has a predisposition to something, we mean by that it is customary for them. It's just customary to that individual to do this certain thing or to do that certain thing. Well, so it is with the bishop in the matter of teaching. Now, I looked at my clock and my time has gotten away from me. The Lord willing, I will continue with this on the Friday broadcast tomorrow. And I hope you'll be listening to the Bright Spot Hour at that time. God richly bless you in a definite way.
Correspondence to the Bright Spot Hour, Post Office Box 4, Greenville, South Carolina 29602.